Hey, welcome back to Burnt Wood Workshop and Happy New Year. Today we're going to talk about engraving on plywood. So I do a lot of engravings on pine and I paint them. But suppose you want to make something like a dice tower and you want to engrave the cobblestones in it or something like that and you want to cut it out. Then you want to engrave on the plywood. But with plywood there are a lot of things to take into account, like the thickness of the veneer on it, because you can burn through really quick. So we're going to discuss 3D engraving and laser engraving on plywood in this video, so stay tuned. Okay, so I've done just a lot of engraving on plywood for different things. So this is basically a rougher 1/8 inch plywood, and you can see it's fairly thin. You can see that came out really nice. And that's one of my usual 3D engraves on pine, that I do a deep engrave, but you could still achieve a really nice 3D effect on plywood. Here's another one. This is just a little Aztec design I engraved that I found. And that's that. And then what we're going to discuss in this video is how you can go from a hot burnt mess to something that looks really nice. So in this video we're going to discuss how to take a plywood engraving that pretty much burnt through and to get your settings right to get something that looks like this. And this is done by choosing the proper speed, your proper lines per centimeter, and your proper power. And we're going to go over the different choices of power, speed, and settings. This one here was a watercolor painting that I converted over and laser engraved that. So you can convert a lot of things over in your program to get your desired results. And that's going to be whatever program you use. I'm using XTool's XCS, which works fantastic. And I also work with Studio, and I'm starting to get into that. So my newer video is going to be using Studio more. But just from this one here, is 20 power, 120 speed, and 70 lines per centimeter. Okay, it looks pretty cool. Now, if you take this one here, this one is 20 power, 120 speed, and 120 lines per centimeter. As you can see, now this one I polyacrylic just to add to the effect. But if you take the two of these side by side, even without the polyacrylic, the detail in the head and the face, if you see them side by side, you could see that the more lines per centimeter, the more detail you get. If you look at this up in here, you could see this engraved nicer. So, choosing the proper lines per centimeter, things like that. And what we're going to go over right now, a whole bunch of different files I ran to show what you can get. So if you want to make something like, say, this dice tower, and you wanted to engrave the cobblestones and a design on it, or something like that, that was where you'd want to engrave in plywood and get a nice image and not burn through. So what you want to do is you want to do test grids like this. And as you can see, we'll flip this one over, you can burn through if you get things set wrong. So keep an eye on your settings for plywood. Don't go 100 power, 10 speed. You'll end up with holes. And that is not the first time I've done that. This was done at 10 speed, 33 power. So you can burn through 1/4 inch plywood at too low of a speed and too high of a power. So something to keep in mind, you want to stick, the little higher speeds and test first before you run a crazy one and burn through. I've done it more than once. But what you want to do is you just want to get things dialed in with a little section of your image to where you get the details you want. So this is too dark, these are too light, you want to get somewhere in the middle, like here or here. With this little image, it's hard to tell until you do a full one. So what I do is I do something like this, where I do a little bit larger on scraps. Now, on this one, I basically tried the settings that they suggested, which was 70 lines per centimeter. Now, at 70 lines per centimeter, the detail isn't great, but it's not bad. But we came out light here and dark here. So we retried it again. Now, both sides of plywood cannot always do the same, because on this side, this came out like this. When I changed the settings a little bit, it came out real hazy. So there's a lot of testing, and nothing is ever going to come out exactly the same every time. But if you boost your lines per centimeter up, see it on this 10 power 120 speed with 100 lines per centimeter, this came out a little more clear than this one, as you can see. This was getting a lot closer to what we want. And it's just going to keep taking testing. Now that flip it over, similar thing, it burnt through. So one side of the plywood may work better than the other depending on your plywood. Now this one here, this is on basswood that I got, I think, from XTool. This one actually worked out really good on both sides. And this was done at 10 power, 120 lines per centimeter. I mean, 10 power, 120 speed, 100 lines per centimeter. It came out a little bit light. So what I did was I just boosted it up to 15 power and kept everything else the same. And as you can see, that came out pretty much what I wanted. That looks pretty decent, okay? So adjusting your lines per centimeter and your power and your speed are what are going to get you what you want. Okay, so we've got our image here, and we've got everything set up. We've got our power set, our speed, which doesn't matter. We've got our lines per centimeter, 120. I'm assuming that the 120 lines per centimeter will stay. Now, what we want to do is we want to mask this. So in order to do that, we're going to select a spot in the face that has a good range of dark and light, like something like that right there. And we don't want to be an inch. We want it to be an inch and 0.4. We want it 0.75. Something like that. And we're going to take that and we're going to pick a spot. Something like that right there is a pretty good light, dark, and everything. So we're done. Now we're masked. So this right here is our test piece. Now we want to make a test grid with that. So we're going to do a material test array. And what we want to do is we don't want to go 100 power. So our max power is probably going to be about, I wouldn't go over 30. You just got to wait till it catches up. I tried punching it in, but it doesn't seem to want to. There we go. Okay, there's 30. Okay, so that is a max power of 30. Our max speed, I don't think we need to go 600. We definitely don't want to go 10. Our max speed, we don't really want to go below 70. So for that, we're going to pick. Once we get it to, with a lot of detail, it works a little slow, but we don't want to go any less than 70. Because as you saw on my test grid, I burnt through 10 at 30 power will burn right through a 1/4 inch board. And we don't want to do that. Okay, so this was running pretty slow trying to get these parameters set just because of the amount of information here. But what we basically don't want to do is our max power is 30 and our minimum power is 10. So that's a good range for power. Our speed, our minimum speed is 70. Our max is 300. That's probably a little high. I think that might be a little high. Let's go 150. No, let's go 200. Okay, there we go. All right, we'll start from here. Okay, so I'm going to jump ahead and just show you the parameters because of all the information in here, these are really slow to edit. So what we did was we went with a power of a maximum of 30 and a minimum of 10. And then for our speed, we want a maximum of 200 and a minimum of 70. It sets you up with a minimum of 10. Make sure you change that because otherwise you'll burn through like I did. But once you get all that set, you hit done. And it will create this test grid that you can basically run and get your best looking settings. And don't burn through them like I do because it makes a smoky mess and you really got to watch close so you don't have a fire in your laser. And we're just waiting. So I will skip ahead once we get this Okay, so we've got our test grid. And things move a little slow with this because it's got a lot of information in it. So you're going to try and move this, and it's going to not move for a bit. But once we can get it to scroll out, I'll show you what this test grid looks like. Okay, so here's our test grid. And with all this information, our test grid is almost 5 3/4, a little over 5 3/4 wide, and almost 6 inches high. So when we run this, this is actually going to do a whole mixed setting of each one of these. So it's going to do a power of 10, and it's going to do it at 70, 103, 135, 168, and 200 speed. And then it's just going to run through each power rating at each one of these speeds. And then you're just going to kind of select in which one looks the best. So we'll run one of these so you can see what it looks like. So this is what our test grid comes out looking like. And what I did was I made a square around it and cut it out. So it's a nice permanent thing that I can keep for reference. Because I use this type of plywood, the sanded Home Depot plywood, quite a bit. Because it's 1/4 inch. It works great for making my dice towers and stuff. But this is the 2 dragon faces that I showed. By using this setup, I end up with 2 sets of parameters. And I wouldn't have ended up with this one at 70 lines per centimeter if I hadn't noticed that they had already set, when I put it in XTool, it set it for 70. Make sure you change your lines per centimeter when you're doing this stuff, because it'll automatically, when you pick the parameters for it, set it for 70. But that's that. Now, the next thing we're going to show is a dice tower I made. And I'm going to show a clip of that, and then I'll show the information on how to make something like that. Okay, so say you wanted to make a plywood dice tower, and you want to do a design like this on it. And I'll show you what it comes out looking like when we're done here. But this is the skull setup. Now, because I loaded this in from XCS into Studio, it didn't save my information, but I had that in here. So we went 35, 150. So we're going to set this for 35, 150. And we're going to set the lines per centimeter where we're going to go grayscale. And we're going to set the lines per centimeter to about 180. And that should get us what we want. We're going to ignore all the others, but we're going to take this one and we're going to put it, we're just going to take all this and get it out of the way. I'm going to put this in here, and we're going to get our laser set up to engrave this. But this is what we're going to engrave right here. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to make sure this one is set for output. And then we got it set for its engraving parameters. We're going to take everything else, and we're just going to hit ignore. And we don't really care if it cuts out. I just want to do a nice little demonstration of this. So we're going to take this, and as you can see, we also have one over here that I tested. I did a bunch of testing with these. Maybe we'll do 2. Tell you what, we'll do 2. We'll do this one here too. And that one we're going to set for 35, 150. And I think I'm on what did I say, 180? We're going to go 160. We're going to make this 160 too. Just because the engraved times increase the more lines per centimeter you put up, obviously. So if you say went from 70 to 200, it's going to take that much longer to engrave. So we want to speed this up a little bit. We could honestly probably go 200. And that would work out really nice. So that's what we're going to run. That's going to be our test. All right, and we're going to show what this looks like. And we're ready to go. We've already processed it. We are framed out. So we're going to process. Now, when you process this, it's going to take a little while because it's a bit of detail. and then it'll give you your estimated time to engrave. And this is what we're going to end up with here. And it's going to take almost an hour to engrave. So we're going to hit start and we're going to engrave. Okay, so this was our engraving on regular wood, just to show you what we can get. Now these numbers were a little lower than I normally run, so we could boost these up a little bit. We didn't burn through, so we could boost the power up a little bit or slow it down. Boosting the power up's a little better sometimes, just because slowing it down just takes longer. So I try to get the power and the speed to a point where it doesn't burn through, but it goes fast enough to make it profitable. So what we ended up with, this is another test I did. This was one with the up power. This one I think was done at 40, 150 or something like that. So this is up power. See how much nicer and darker that looks. This one here was done even a little higher. This one actually burned through, but there was no detail when it burned through, so I didn't really mind. But when it burns through, with spots that don't have detail, it does make it a nice dark background. So that's something there. So on this one here, what I tried to do was, I told you I had to have one half was polyacrylic and the other one wasn't. The reason I did that was because my wife wanted this, and it was already a pre-finished board with polyacrylic. And this came out so dark, I thought that maybe engraving, it would come out darker. But as you can see, it didn't even engrave through the polyacrylic. So you could try some more testing on that, but I don't think that worked well with the regular engraving. And then these are some of the embossed ones that got done dark, but if you could see the detail, the flowers and everything came out really nice on these. So 2025 is over, we're into 2026, and I'm going to be doing more videos. So if you like what I'm doing, subscribe, give a thumbs up. If you want to do stuff like dice towers and things like that, knowing how to engrave in the plywood is a really helpful thing. I do these little book stands, things like that, and you could just do regular engravings, or you can get more detailed like these. And just to give you a little peek, my next video is going to be going into how to do something like this. So stay tuned.